Welcome to the King Street Cinema podcast. My name is Andy and joined as ever by James.
Hello.
Co-host, worker of the King Street Cinema.
Yes.
And I was going to start the show by just going, but that might have scared everybody and they might not have listened on further. We are today talking about 1980 classic slasher horror, the influential Friday the 13th.
Indeed.
One I have not seen on the big screen before, ever. And it's been shown as part of the VHS season, isn't it?
Yeah, the Be Kind Rewind VHS season. Films exclusively shown at the cinema on VHS.
On VHS, which is going to be really cool.
Yes.
This will be the second in that series.
It will be, indeed.
And the first one will probably be shown by the time this episode
Indeed,
goes
Variety's on the 6th of September, and we are recording this on the 4th.
So. Yeah, I might get out just before, but Variety's well worth a watch.
It is.
I've only seen it once, and it was at your cinema a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And interesting film.
Yeah, it's great.
Look it up, go see. But Friday the 13th is being shown on, I forget the date. When is it?
I think maybe Friday the 13th of September.
Friday the 13th of September. Yeah. Perfect. Like the film was made just for that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this movie for a minute as well. I've got a lot to say. It was made by the director, Sean S. Cunningham. I believe he just goes under Sean Cunningham, or did go under Sean Cunningham after. Is that true?
Really? I don't know. I've always known him as Sean S. Cunningham professionally, but he might not be anymore. I haven't really seen anything by him since probably the mid-80s or late 90s.
Yeah, he's more of a producer, really.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he produced this and directed this, but you're right.
And prior to this, he produced Last House on the Left.
Did.
Which done really well on a small budget with Wes Craven.
Yeah, it's become more, I'd say, infamous than famous in certain respects, or at least at the time it was, wasn't it? It was one of them video nasty things, and everyone was like, "Oh no, awful, can't watch that." And then spent years on the banned in the UK, and then got re-released in the early 2000s. And stuff. Yeah. And when it came out, it did do really well though. I would have thought so, yeah. I'm sure
in America, especially. I don't know if it.
I'm sure it
got released over here.
Crazy well, considering the budget, it must have been really low, and it was exactly the kind of film that loads of people wanted to go see.
And it had that tagline: "It's only a movie."
It's only a movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, Halloween was a massive hit.
It was,
which basically is why they made this movie. It was because Halloween, the day of Halloween, he basically wanted to make. A film called Friday the 13th.
Yeah, I think Sean S. Cunningham just saw Halloween and went, right, I want my one.
Yeah.
I want to do my version of that.
And basically. He put out an ad in Variety magazine with just Friday the 13th and something like the scariest film you'll ever see.
Yeah.
There was no, they hadn't written it, they hadn't done anything, but they put out the ad.
But I think partially what he wanted to do with that was to see if there was copyright on it.
Okay.
So put it out there, see if anyone comes back and says, oi, I've got rights to that. You can't do that. Sort of thing.
And they didn't.
Yeah. Well, apparently someone did.
Oh.
But no one seems to know exactly who. But someone must have bought them off, like paid them some cash or something.
And they went.
And then they went away. Yeah.
Went away laughing because they didn't have the copyright.
It's like, here, have a couple of quid, and then they'll be fine.
And then, but this must have been done quite quickly because Halloween was 78.
Yeah. So I'm sure they saw the film and went, right, let's work on our own.
Yeah.
Like straight away would have been like, let's start working on it.
Yeah, and it sort of takes Halloween to another level. There's more gore. And it sort of embellishes on those now famous slasher rules that kind of started in Halloween, but more so in this with the have sex, you die. I'll be right back. That sort of, and you watch this movie now, and are we going to do spoilers? I mean,
we hadn't spoken before we started doing the podcast because this was something I was thinking earlier before I came here. Was how much of the film should we, like you say, spoil necessarily? Because I don't know how many people would have already. I mean, the film is 43 years old.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that most, if not all, the people that would come and see it would have already seen it. But still, I don't know.
I think we should talk about the cast, mention the characters, and even though I reckon 95% of listeners.
Yeah,
and we'll know the killer. Let's not say who the killer is.
Yeah, okay. We'll keep the killer quiet. I mean, I suppose. Yeah, you're right. Let's just not. But I mean, let's just leave it.
Yeah, I think we can talk about it without. But Yeah, this is. But I'll talk about bits of the film because one thing I want to mention is the opening is in the past, very much like Halloween. It sets the scene up with an incident that happened in the past.
Sure, absolutely.
And it ends, and this was to do with, I think, test screening and stuff. There is a surprise, much like the end of Carrie.
Yes.
And both of those movies had come out before, and that was. It's almost like they had this big pot of horror and put it in and stirred, and we got this movie.
Absolutely. I mean, I think. See, the story of the end is very important, I think, or at least the ending is very important for this reasoning of the very continuation of, something scary to keep you on the edge and think the horror hasn't ended even though the film has, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I've heard differently that it was Tom Savini, the guy who did the makeup for this movie and many other classic horror movies, who said you need to have a scare ending. You must have one.
I heard that was said. I didn't know it actually came from him. And there was
apparently he did say that, but I don't know if that was the reasoning why they listened to him and then went, "All right, let's do that." Or like you say, they did a test screen and people were like, "You need to have a scare."
Yeah, and then he popped up and said, "Let's do a scare ending."
But he had just seen Carrie, like you say, and that was his thinking that was a great ending in Carrie. This film should have that kind of ending as well.
And then it was the director said in an interview that he thinks the ending is what basically got the attention of the film, and it got that big release. I think it was Warner Brothers in America and Paramount everywhere else.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And he seems to think maybe if it wasn't for that, it would have just been this small movie.
Almost certainly, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Because the film does have the ending is truly the thing that gives the reason for the franchise.
Yeah.
There isn't a franchise without it ultimately, and it's a classic horror finale.
Yeah, and if you don't know what's coming, it's a jump.
Absolutely.
I've seen this movie so many times. It's one of those I can't honestly remember the first time I saw it. Probably on video as a kid, and I don't think I knew it was coming, even though I'd probably seen images and pictures of that ending. I still don't. I
don't think I did either.
But one thing I did know was the end of Carrie. I knew before I saw it because everyone talked about it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one that my parents saw that before I was born in the cinema, and my mum would always go on about how the end scared and then tell me about it.
Right, yeah.
I'm
I had those stories too growing up with parents telling me about and horror movies. And,
This film was brilliant. Yeah. This happened. You can't see it. No,
exactly. You have to wait till you're older.
Yeah, or when we're out. So we'd have to deal with you crying. But I think it's a good ending. It does kind of feel thrown on, but maybe that's because I know it is.
I mean, okay, so I'm not sure. I mean, my thinking of this film is a bit kind of, like I say, there seem to be kind of conflicting stories, I think, about how things ended up being in the film and stuff like that. It is classic in the horror sense. It's not something that's like they were the first to do it. Obviously, I say influenced by a film that was recently out before. Halloween doesn't have this ending either. It has an ending. It has an ending which gives the illusion that we're going to go forward with more. Like there should be, there's a room here for more Halloween. There's room here for more Friday the 13th. But it's a different kind of ending.
Well, this is what I'm saying about the influences. I think what works with Friday the 13th is it takes almost like the best bits out of a lot of movies, and it is its own thing.
Yeah.
And the franchise becomes more like Halloween. Right,
absolutely.
But also, when you look at the later Halloween films, Michael Myers turns more into the character from the Friday the 13th. I think
you're probably
right.
I
think they sort of bounce off each other.
I think they become very similar. Yeah. Absolutely.
So they take off each other, but it's influenced by much more than just Halloween. We mentioned Carrie. There is there's other films. There's a big other influence that I don't want to mention because it might give away or hint the twist in the film, you must know what I'm talking about.
Right at the second, I'm drawing a blank for some reason.
Yeah, but there is an older film that I will just tell you when we're not recording. Because I thought it was bloody obvious.
I'm sure it is. I'm just my mind's just gone. Right. That's something we're not going to mention.
No, something like that. But let's talk about. I done my impression of the score earlier.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
It's very good. It's absolutely memorable. You can't forget that.
Yeah. And I've written down the composer's name, but my handwriting's so terrible. Hey, Harry.
Go ahead. Manfredi.
Yeah, I done my notes at about four of them.
Fredini, I think that's the one. Harry Manfredini.
I've got my handwriting.
It's an Italian name.
It looks like Harry McFriend. But he done a lot of horror scores. He done House, Slaughter High.
Yeah, I think this might be his first horror, and then becomes that's sort of what he ends up doing. So he does a lot of the Friday the 13th, almost all of the sequels.
Yeah,
I think, and yes, House, which I remember very favorite. I love that. I love that film. That's great.
House is cool. Yeah. Another one that spawned a lot of sequels, and but the music
and is Sean as well. Sean S. Cunningham.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. But the music, like Halloween, is very you hear that and also spoofed a lot. You get
absolutely,
but iconic. So
yeah, exactly.
Which, when you think about Halloween, even Nightmare on Elm Street, the music from the movies from this era done a lot. You could put a scare in there by just playing that few seconds of music that you recognise. Yeah, and it would get you on edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, good budget saver as well.
I'd say so. Yeah.
And speaking of budget, do you know the figures on this one?
Yeah, I do, because it's about half a million
just
budget,
over,
something like that, and it makes close to 60 mil.
Yeah.
And I think again, I don't know if that's a home, like domestic or international. But it's huge, obviously. Yeah. So this is like many horror films that were extremely successful, or at least have the legacy that this one does. This is how they begin. They begin as very small, tiny, independent budget movies that kids just wanted to see, basically, and they made loads of money.
Yeah,
loads and loads of money.
Yeah, and good. I'm glad it did.
Yeah,
and for years after the sequels done, they still kept them quite low budget, and I don't think it ever went straight to video, did it? This franchise, I think they all,
as far as I'm aware, not. Yeah.
Whereas Halloween, by sort of part 4, 5, did.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I think Halloween 4 and 5 were straight. 5 definitely was, and 6.
Here, maybe.
I think in America.
Yes, well,
possibly.
Really? Wow.
Well, number 6 was definitely a made video, the one with Paul Rudd.
Oh, yeah, the Paul Rudd one.
Yeah, so maybe I just over here.
That definitely. Yeah, because I would, again, wouldn't know for certain, but I would say so just from my memory, because I remember it coming out and it having no sort of cinema
fanfare
at all, and then just seeing it directly in the video shop.
Yeah, that was that possibly the first one I actually remember coming out.
Yeah.
And video shop. I mean, this is why this is perfect. It was a big cinematic hit, but I grew up watching these movies on video.
Yes, and I think most people did. Here, anyway. I think.
Yeah, I mean, they done all right at the box office, but I generally think most of the audience were not old enough to see them on the big screen.
Well, I think because of the popularity that certainly was there at the start, but you got to remember, like, if we're talking 1980 here, this is the day. Though video does exist, it's not the popular thing that it becomes a few years down the line,
which is when the sequels came out.
Exactly.
I'm saying about first seeing. I imagine the first movie wasn't the first one I saw of this franchise.
This is certainly the first one I saw.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
But again, by the time I had seen this. All of them were up to Jason's Dead, the 9th one. Jason Goes to Hell.
Jason Goes to Hell.
Freddy's Dead.
Freddy's Dead. Yeah.
See, mixing up my franchises here. Yeah, so Jason Goes to Hell, which I think is about 1993. Yeah, it comes out, and I again haven't seen that one either. But I remember that coming out, and I hadn't seen any of the movies. And probably maybe a year later or something like that, that's when I watched this one for the first time. I knew all of them really well by the fact that so many people had seen them, and it told me basically what happens in every single one. So I did know what happens.
Yeah.
I just hadn't seen it. And then watching them, and especially with the first one, I remember not really remembering what people had told me. And then when it happened, I was like, oh yeah. I remember people saying that.
Yeah. And another thing what I really like about the first movie is it's got that. I suppose it's probably comes from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The mad old man warning them. Do you remember that bit?
Yeah, sure.
Which is nothing like in The Simpsons and things like that. It's spoofed.
Yeah.
Spoofed. So
but that,
Crazy Ralph.
Yeah, Crazy Ralph, who does two. Yeah, he has two roles in the movie. Really, one is to foreshadow what's to come.
Yeah.
Tell everybody what's going to happen,
Brilliant.
basically,
Brilliant.
and to be a red herring, of course.
Yeah.
Potentially he's the killer.
Yeah.
But of course, obviously he's not.
No. Yeah.
And there's a fair few of those in this movie,
Yeah.
in fact, where you go, oh, well, he could be the killer, or she could be the killer. And,
this is the thing. It's the only one of the franchise which is a whodunit.
Yeah.
And
but it's classic horror. It's classic mystery horror. It's not. Again, they're not doing something that no one had done before with all these tropes.
But it's
great.
It sets
they do it really
it
well.
aside from Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even a few years later, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so many different things, and that's why I think it works. Whereas a lot of these movies, I mentioned Slaughter High earlier, that's pretty much just ripping this off.
Right.
And then later on, you get April Fool's Day and Prom Night. Sure. And they're just, there's not much to them apart from someone like they're killing.
So we just talk about like the slasher genre as a whole, I suppose, for a minute. This one, for me personally, this is the one that kicks off properly. There were people that watched, like the reason why this one exists, that watched Halloween and went, right, we've got to make our own. Because this wasn't the only one that was doing that. But this is certainly the movie that I think did something. I couldn't really explain why this is the one, but this certainly for me is the one that people en masse would have seen and gone, right, we don't just need to make our own version of this. We need to turn this into a thing that goes on forever, basically. Like it just becomes a staple that you're not going to get one or two of these a year. There are going to be dozens of these now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you've got to think as well that in America, the summer camp thing's a big thing, whereas here we don't really. I mean, I know American summer camps from slasher movies and Ernest Goes to Camp.
Sure.
And the cartoon Camp Candy, John Candy.
Yes. Classic stuff.
So over there, it's a big thing for, you send your kids away to be safe for the summer and get rid of them.
Yeah.
And they're in more danger than if you left them in front of their television box.
Well, that is a theory that certain people have come up with for the reasoning for why these films exist. This very, I don't know, I suppose conservative-minded attitude towards, the kids are going to be promiscuous and misbehave because the adults aren't there, the authority's not there, and look what's going to happen. Look what happens if you're supposed to be protecting your children from all the dangers of the world, kind of thing. And if you let them run wild, well, look, they get what they deserve then, don't they? So
you have sex, you die.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the thing. There's the criticism of these movies. Which it got a lot at the time, and bad reviews, and but if you look at it from that point of view, it's got a very conservative message.
Absolutely.
So the people who are criticising it, if you look into it, are probably the sort of people who should support it.
Yeah. This is the funny thing, isn't it, about art and stuff like that? Like people can look at the movie who perhaps come from a very conservative background and go, oh, because it's so gory and it has nudity in it and all this kind of stuff, therefore, bad, even though that the message may be in a very weird kind of way on the side, like you say, of the people that are criticizing it. But of course, I think all this is nonsense. Well, at least my opinion of it, I don't really, I see how it can see that way. Yeah. But I don't think that was the intent.
Oh no, it wasn't made for this moral. Don't go out and be promiscuous.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that in the first, you want the most innocent one you can root for more. And that's why often in, say, I'll use Halloween as an example, the final girl, the one who everyone would think was the virgin, you have more empathy for that person than someone out there going crazy, I think.
I mean, again, that may be true. That may be the way that a lot of people feel. I never felt that way. Like when I watched these movies when I was younger, I never would think I really want that person to survive over all the others. I would always generally think that I didn't understand why they were all being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the way my mind.
Well, I was at that. I mean,
because it never made sense.
The critics would probably hate me, but when I was a kid, it was like, look at how they all die in different ways. Because I knew it wasn't real, and it was. I loved the special effects, and it's seeing that.
See, that's what I mean.
That's what these movies became. It was each film. One of the trailers, I think, is like in the last one there were so many kills. In this one, there's more.
Exactly. That's what it certainly became about. And Cunningham certainly a guy who wanted to crank that up.
Yeah.
Like his thing was all the movies that have come before that are this kind of thing. I want this to be the most of those. Right. And then after he's done that, everyone's trying to up each other on that alone, on the way that the kills look alone, the gore and everything and how realistic I suppose it is or whatever, where I guess the kind of the stories, the plot, the characters are becoming less important. I suppose this is what happens as the films go on, which is why they become, I suppose, a bit boring as time goes on.
Yeah, and they're easily spoofed as well.
Easily spoofed, and I guess are really only left for hardcore fans of that kind of thing that want to see elaborate kills.
And when it comes to the teams who get slaughtered, the ones you remember are the interesting ones, and there are some throughout the franchise.
Yeah,
and you get I think that it was a wasted opportunity to have a lot of cool characters. In the first few, they are all individuals. They're all, and the actors they all do the horror cons now. They all get on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think real fans will go and see the characters, even if they're in the film for 10 minutes. Yeah. There's some really. The third one, I nearly gave a spoiler, but there is a guy who's at a Comic-Con next summer, and I want to meet this guy. I want to talk to him about the little bit in the film he done because it's so funny, and for the franchise, it's done a lot for it. So when it's done well, I like that there's lots of characters and they all get killed off, because if you do like them characters, even though they're going to probably die, it is when they die, not just wow that their throat's been ripped out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
I agree.
And that's where a lot of other franchises more so than this.
Yeah.
I rewatched the Sleepaway Camp, the first three. The first one's a banger, by the way. I love it. But the sequels, there's apart from the main character and main few characters, there's so many just like talking extras, really.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And that's the trouble with low budget horror. That's they want the money, and they know that, especially when these came out, that they'll sell. And that's what ultimately there was the drop in these films, and then they came back spoofed. And I don't care what anyone says, Scream is a spoof.
Yeah, yeah, certainly.
That's my little went off on a tangent there.
That's right. I mean, we are talking the genre.
Yeah.
And Friday the 13th is a classic example of the slasher genre. Like, say, other than Halloween, I would say it's probably the most important. And in certain ways, I think it's probably the most important.
When it comes to franchises, I think Friday the 13th has gone on to be the bigger franchise, or certainly did in the 80s and 90s, whereas the first Halloween movie, really, you can always see as a standalone.
Yeah.
Whereas Friday the 13th is that, but it is that first step to something huge.
Yeah.
And I really love this movie. I think it's so well made, so likable for that, if you like that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And it is so different from the rest of the franchise in many ways, but the franchise could not be what it is without, and there's so many throwbacks to things in this first movie throughout it. That it's one that I these movies, like the Nightmare on Elm Street films, I find myself watching every few years.
Right.
And this one is the one that every time I see it, I think it's better.
Right.
Maybe because of how there's still loads. We had them in, what's it called, in the name in or The Violent Nature this year.
Yeah,
that movie wouldn't be made if it wasn't for this. You know.
No, well, that film is a look at the slasher genre.
Yeah.
Told from the perspective of the killer.
Yeah.
So that's it. So that's it being turned on itself.
Yeah, but look at where it's set in the summer camp.
Sure.
And the main character is so like, it is a bit Michael Myers, but it's also very Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that won't ever go away.
Yeah.
And if it, you know, I
can't see why it would really go away. You know,
yeah.
Makes money. People enjoy them.
Yeah, and people, it's a weird one because so this is a classic, but the sequels, I think a lot of people enjoy them because they're not so good.
There's probably some of that.
Yeah, people. I don't like they're so bad it's good, and people laughing at them. But I think in a lot of horror, when something does scare people, they laugh. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, sure.
Especially in cinemas, there's
it's nervous laughter. Yeah, because you feel you're expressing an emotion, and it's kind of like, especially here in England, we don't like doing that too much.
No.
So when you do, if you get scared, you can, you're visibly showing that you're scared. You'll laugh. They go, I'm not silly for getting scared. Sort of thing. Yeah.
I'll just add this in. We don't react and stuff in this country. I went to Fright Fest where you do clap after every film.
Yeah.
The film I saw after, I was in a multiplex. I can't think what it was, and it finished, and I went, oh, whoops. I don't want them thinking I'm from across the Atlantic.
You foreigner.
I was like this, but I sort of turned it around. Right, we're done. I'm going.
Time for a cup of tea.
Crumpet. But yeah, it's. But I'm looking forward to seeing this with an audience as well. That's something I've got to mention because even though they were big video movies, I have fond memories of watching these. Renting them,
absolutely,
with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a whole bunch of friends together watching them. The horror movies were always like that, weren't they? They were always a thing you'd get like all your mates together to watch them and stuff.
Yeah, and should we just as well? We haven't really mentioned the cast. Because the big star at the time, I suppose, was Betsy Palmer.
Betsy Palmer was certainly the person who had credentials, had been working since the 50s. Theatre as well as film and television. Behind her belt. So she was what you would say a proper actor. Had the training and all of this kind of stuff, and was really into getting to know and understand her character.
Yeah, more of a character actor though than star.
Certainly, not necessarily a star herself, but like I said, a proper actor.
But do you know the story of why she made the film? I love this.
I don't know.
She hated the script. Didn't want to do it, and wasn't doing so well in her career at the time. And basically thought no one would see it. Needed a paycheck to get a new car because her car had.
Right, I might have heard that.
And she done it, and like, oh god, I've done it, and then. Even though it was very successful, went on the quiet, and it wasn't until years later that she was just like, you know what? I'm going to embrace this. And you see pictures of her. I don't know if she's still alive.
No,
she's not. But I've seen lots of pictures of like her with fans, like really like grin on her face. I'm loving this. But then that's something I think these movies have helped the careers of a lot of, not so much her. But the main the example I'm going to give is it Adrienne King who played Alice?
The final girl.
Who she'd been in a few films before this, and final girl in this, and then do you know the story why she stopped acting? This is a weird one.
No,
she got a lot of attention and a stalker, and it scared her.
Oh no, I had heard that. Yes.
I
had heard that.
And she sort of stepped back. I think she might have worked behind the camera and done. But no, I follow her on Instagram, and she's at a Comic-Con every week.
I know she does
but it's because as you get older, and I hate to say it, it's probably more for female actors. Less roles come in, but a lot of people must have steady careers from just going meeting the fans.
Sure, I would have thought so.
You get that more in horrors than you would say if you was a bit part comedy actor or something. You know,
horror and sci-fi. But the most horror. Definitely.
Which I think is good. And I met the final girl star of I mentioned Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah,
and so friendly, so enthusiastic, but this has become their job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a fan, it's great.
Yeah.
And it keeps the movies alive as well if they're out doing it.
Yeah.
Some I feel sorry for because you think they'd probably rather be acting.
Yeah.
But it's still, that's why these movies are still getting shown at cinemas and still, because there's something keeping it going. But yeah, so Betsy Palmer, this kind of revamped her career, I suppose, as well.
It must have given some sort of renewal, I'm sure.
Yeah. And Adrienne King, who I think is a really good actress.
Yeah.
And Final Girl, and very charismatic. And I think it's definitely the most likeable out of the teens, isn't it?
Certainly. And like you say, from the way that you read these movies, I think is probably how the director wants people to read them more. So the final person, generally a girl, is like you say, the most likable, and probably the most, I suppose, less crazy, wild, and got a level head, good head on their shoulders, and you think, oh yeah, that's someone you'd like to know.
Yeah, they're all drinking, having sex,
and
there's one in the corner knitting.
But that's the thing, she's not doing that.
No,
that's the thing. It's like, it's good because it's like, she's like, she wants to be with everybody else. She's just, like I say, got more of a level head.
Yeah, or probably more anxious, got that part of her, nervy.
I mean, so they do set up kind of plot, and if we just talk about the movie a little bit, like earlier on, they set up her as being someone that doesn't really want to be there necessarily, but is there because she's trying to help a friend out, kind of thing. And it's giving us, the audience, the sort of sense that she may be a teenager, maybe, because I'm not quite sure if she's meant to be a teenager, because she's not with all the other kids. They all come a little later on, don't they?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe she's like a year or two older, maybe. I'm not too sure, but she definitely comes across as more mature, right? And so she's got this kind of attitude that you're like, you're more of the sort of the person that's been around a little bit, seen perhaps a little more than these kids, not so naive, and therefore has the potential to fight the evil, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Because not so much head in the clouds kind of thing, but at the same time not really wanting to be there. So perhaps have this attitude of I want to go, I want to leave. I want to live. I want to get beyond this camp, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So because I think even though she's not played extremely strong, like as a tough character, she has got a bit of toughness to her. I think.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
She definitely stands out.
Yes, and I think that's important, that we don't just go, why is she still living? Why isn't that doesn't she should be dead like the rest of them.
But also the fact she doesn't want to be there, you feel a bit more sorry for her because you
feel that there's something a little bit more to her than she's just a teenager that's come to the camp. But remember, they're also not. They're the people that are meant to be the counsellors, aren't they? They're meant to be the grown-ups, and that's why I suppose in a bit it's a little bit like, oh, you're supposed to know better. So, and you're not behaving like you know better. Therefore,
Well, that's the thing, because they were basically teenagers looking after younger teenagers.
Yeah,
and that is they're too busy, doing the drugs and doing the sex, that they're not looking after them. Yeah. So that's the.
I would also mention though that even though that these elements to these characters are true, it's very tame stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, thinking about it, even probably at the time, I think people would have been a bit kind of like, they're all right, really.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that, as a kid, I knew that what they were smoking in these films. But it was it wasn't like Train Spotting when they get, do you know what I mean? So it's more of it's a casual.
It's very casual. It's very laid back.
Yeah. It's not like literally they're being left with drug addicts.
And some of the later slashers, you're at full blown parties where people are getting absolutely smashed and stuff. Yeah. And this gives the killer a great opportunity because everyone's sort of wasted, which I think is not as strong. I don't think that's as powerful as this kind of thing, where people aren't really doing things that are so bad. They're very normal. They're very much this kind of things that the average person would be doing. A little bit of, little bit of cannabis, a little bit of drinking. That's about it. Tiny.
And that's another thing that gets spoofed later with. They actually do that in the Sleepaway Camp sequels. It's like, they've done something really tame, but the killer wants an excuse to kill them.
And exactly. That's so it's been taken as a joke ultimately. Where I suppose that again kind of flies a little bit in the face of the whole attitude of, look how badly they're behaving, they deserve it. Because like I say, in this one at least, the early versions of this kind of take, it's not really that bad. No. Like the way they're behaving's, like I say, quite you'd say quite normal. There were movies that were made previous to this, in the 70s, where you have a lot of kids behaving much more crazy and much more like, whoa, kids are out of control kind of thing. So I think this one is quite tame, which I think is meant to be played on, like even if your kids are not so bad, they're not safe.
But there is something with the plot that a bit like I mentioned in Sleepaway Camp, the killer is looking for an excuse, and the excuse is that's bad, but as an audience it isn't, and that kind of works with it in this one.
I mean, the killer's motivation is still there. Like there's the reasoning, the plot reasoning for the killer doing the kills is a good one, I think, in the sense of a horror movie. It does. There is agency there, that there's reasoning there, and that's a good thing. That's not just like, it's just someone going around killing kids just for the sake of it.
Which some of the later poorer ones is.
So that's why I'm a fan of this movie, because it does for me the things that I want from a horror movie, right?
And another two cast members to mention.
Well, of course, so Kevin Bacon.
Kevin the Man Bacon, pre-Footloose, post-Animal House.
Indeed, and I don't know if he's a fan of this movie, of him being in this movie. His role is very pedestrian. It's not very much, sadly. I don't think.
It was work for him. There's another story I heard was another one of the actors was talking about getting in character, and he laughed at them.
I would say that if you're a Kevin Bacon fan and you haven't seen this movie, see this film not for Kevin Bacon, because he's not. You don't really notice him as being. Oh look, there's Kevin Bacon.
He's not like going Christian Glover in one of the sequels.
He's going crazy.
Does a brilliant dance. But I don't think Kevin Bacon's ashamed of it. But he's got the way his career's gone. He's got other things to talk about, and I think if his role was more, if he was the final boy, he'd probably do the conventions about it and do that sort of thing. Because I don't think he's the sort of person who is ashamed of anything in his career, to be honest. But he's gone on to be in Tremors, Footloose, Flatliners, and serious dramas.
Absolutely.
I don't think he's ashamed of it. But and also Harry Crosby. Do you know this guy?
Harry Crosby. Okay, so you explain Harry Crosby.
He's Bing Crosby's son. Isn't it?
That's the thing. That's what I was going to say. It's like I can't remember that Harry Crosby had done much else.
But he attempted a music career as well.
I had heard that, but I was really...
There's lots of tales of all the cast members and director and everybody just asking about his dad the whole time on the set. And I think he had a more famous sister.
That's that. Again, I think you're right about that. I did know a little bit about the Crosbys, but I have not. I've not retained that information in my head, and certainly not for this podcast.
Let's go off and talk about Bing Crosby for an hour. I just think that's an interesting little fact. Because obviously, with the name, he'd have a lot of attention thrown at him, and probably found it hard to get acting work. So done this, and didn't really springboard off it to a bigger. Which is a shame because. Well, I don't know if it's a shame. He must have felt bad because it was such a big hit that he thought, right, the world's my oyster. Where's my Footloose?
And
sadly,
we weren't really Not really bacon enough for that one.
No, not the man bacon. And we mentioned Tom Savini done the special effects.
Yeah.
Who prior to this had done a lot. He does loads still.
He'd done a fair bit.
But Dawn of the Dead was the big one.
Dawn of the Dead was the one that Sean Cunningham's seen and gone, I need to get that guy.
Yeah. I don't know if he came back. He definitely didn't do the second one. No. Because he was offered it and done The Burning instead. Yeah. Which I love that film. It's not as good as this.
Burning is this, isn't it? Really, but,
kind of, yeah.
But again, ramped up and even more so with the typical characters like that you see in every single movie. So you get a more wacky character.
But it's gorier.
It's gory. Everything in it's ramped.
And one thing I like about it is you've got Jason Alexander, George from Seinfeld, as a teenager. Yeah. Probably with a wig on.
And what's his name from the Short Circuit movies? Is it not? No, he is, isn't it?
Well, Cuttenberg.
No, from both of the Short Circuit movies.
Oh, he is. Yeah. Who was in Mario Brothers?
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name?
His name's like
Fisher King.
Fisher
Stevens.
Fisher Stevens. That's the one. Yeah, he's in it.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Again, he's playing the sort of the more wacky character. Hey, I'm the funny one.
And there is is it Helen Hunt or someone's got like a very brief.
It's Holly Hunter.
Holly Hunter, that's it. I got the initials right.
I think that's right. It's either Holly Hunter.
It is Holly Hunter, yeah. Barely in it, but in it.
Around there's a campfire scene, which again, classic. Yeah. In all these movies, and she's one of the people around the campfire. I think that's like the only time.
I do think it's very interesting that Savini went for that over the second one lead. Yeah. But maybe he just didn't want to be so associated with one franchise.
Yeah, I would say that's probably what it was. But I don't know.
He's cool. He's done.
He is good. He's great, and he did a lot of movies in the 80s. Definitely known for work he did in the 80s more than any other decade. Yeah. I think from what I heard is The Prowler, which is not that great of a slasher film. It's okay, but it's not that great. He says that the work on that one is his best work. He says that was the best stuff he ever made. Okay. So for watching it for that reason alone is definitely worth it.
Yeah. And of course he was Sex Machine in From Dusk Till Dawn.
He was, because he does a lot of acting, a lot of stunts as well. He wasn't just doing makeup effects is not like no mean feat. It's very talented stuff, but he's talented in lots of things. Like he was a dancer, I think, a fencer.
Was he not a war photographer?
Oh yeah, he was So he was in the Vietnam War. He's that old, obviously, and he photographed destroyed machinery and bodies, obviously, and it's because of that and not that he was already doing makeup and did makeup at the time while he was in the Vietnam War. In fact, scaring people by doing it, making it up and frightening people with it. But seeing the dead bodies at the war was really inspirational for him to do the amazing effects that he ended up doing, and it was also a way of removing him from the war. Making it so that he could cope with it, basically.
Cool guy.
Very cool guy.
And we'll just go on to, we've mentioned sequels. There was a TV series, interestingly, but basically shared very little apart from the name. Right. I don't know if you ever saw the
No, didn't see that.
It was weird. It was like set in this second-hand antiques type shop, and different adventures happened. I've seen like one episode, and I'm like, what the hell was this?
It's an anthology type thing.
Yeah, I think so. But there's these two people. I think I've only seen one episode. My brother somehow befriended one of the cast members. Mm-hmm. She lived or lives in Suffolk.
Well, okay.
But it's something I should give a go. But I think when I was really young, I saw an episode. It might be when Channel 5 or something first started. Yeah. And I was like, young me was like, what the bloody hell is this? And so, nah. And there's been video games, comic books, a remake that I'm going to say I'm really not a fan of.
Right. I haven't seen it.
It's the first movie. It's called Friday the 13th, and they redo the first movie in something like 10 minutes, and then it's just a over the top Halloween style. But some people like it. They're wrong. And it is when I've watched it like 3 times because I think I'm not anti remake. Yeah. This time well, but I'm just like, nah, this is bad. It's the Crow of its time. I said it.
Everyone's saying it.
But at least the Crow tries something different. fails miserably, but it does. So this is a movie that you, being horror fans, which I assume a lot of you are.
Yeah.
Get yourself out there. Come see it on Friday the 13th of September, 7:30.
Right. It's a 15 certificate.
It's a 15 now.
It used to be an 18.
Yeah.
It was an 18 growing up, for us growing up, certainly,
Yeah.
which obviously was appealing.
Yeah.
You know, that it's an 18. You're a little kid. You're like, yeah, 18. Woo.
Yeah.
But 15, not so exciting. But nothing has changed.
No.
You know, they haven't removed anything, made it.
Is it gonna be a weird one that you show on the VHS? So it's be a 15, but 18 will flash out before it.
That might happen.
Yeah.
I don't really know. Like, I haven't seen the VHS copy yet. So, but you're probably right.
Yeah. You drag a 15-year-old in it, and he or she would be like, yes! When they
Well, this is the interesting thing about certification and everything. I mean, the films don't change. You know, generally, it's not like stuff gets removed to make it a 15. It's still the same. So what? You know, this is a big, huge. This is a conversation for the ages, really. Yeah. The whole sort of like what has changed in the hearts and minds of the people that all of a sudden now a movie that was 18 for so many years is now 15.
And it's happened a lot. Yeah, a few things go up, but so many. What I'm going to say, so many people criticise the younger generation, modern times, for being too sensitive and this sort of thing. There's so many films that we grew up with being able, like Aliens are 15, Nightmare on Elm Street's are 15, Terminator's are 15, Confessions of a Window Cleaner 18. 50 years old. Why haven't you shown that one? But yeah, a lot has. You know, I think video games is one thing, but I think honestly, kids nowadays know it's not real.
Yeah.
And they're less sensitive because yes, they're exposed to more, but they're also a little bit more intelligent.
I think so.
And that is thanks to great parenting from us.
Yeah, I would say so.
Not me, but.
I think because time has, there's been a lot of this kind of stuff. It's more in just the mainstream, as it were. It's not something that's gone, oh, no, you can't look at that, don't see that kind of thing. Then, people will go, well, actually, it's all right, isn't it? It's not that bad.
Yeah.
Because it's not. I mean, even as a kid watching Friday the 13th, it was never like, oh, my God, I should not be watching this.
Yeah, and it is that if someone sees something and imitates it, which these films have been accused of a lot over the years, who's to say they wouldn't see something on the bill or something? I think certain people's minds are that way inclined, or it's to do with their upbringing, maybe. I don't think seeing a movie, this is a different debate, but I think time has proven that these movies don't make serial killers.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So, yeah.
I've never really, to an extent, understood the rating system. I understand that there's stuff that kids shouldn't see, and then that's it. That's to me like the thing. But the whole 15, 18 thing, I've never really got that to, not to the extent. And that's clearly obvious that it's silly, as we are witnessing now in the modern age where these things are changing. Yeah. And they're not changing because we as people change. We're just exposed to stuff. We're taking stuff more seriously in the sense that we're being mature about these things, not going, oh, kids, young people, being overly protective or worrying to the certain extremes that it will, I don't know, like you say, turn people into serial. I mean, who really ever thought that seriously? Clearly people have done, but it just seems so ridiculous.
I think it was overprotective parents and stuff, who come from a good place, they mean well, but they're looking to blame one thing opposed to, say, society itself or their own parenting. And another thing I've never really understood is it easy now, but it used to be certain words you said once or twice a film was 18.
Sure.
And as a kid, I'd be out in the street and parents are swearing at their kids. So why...
Exactly. I mean, there are all these just complete inconsistencies to the extreme.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think they should say the C word in Bambi, but certain films with the odd word in, kids should be able to see, surely, because they're exposed to it everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe not on purpose.
But it should be the tone. But you see, it's tonal stuff, isn't it? It's like, right, so you're telling a story that is clearly meant for very young children. You know, that's its target audience. Sure, other people can enjoy it, hopefully, but that's its target audience. So that won't have these kind of things. But something that's a bit more, you know, for an adult audience. Maybe certain, you know, kids can enjoy it, but that should be the discretion to the adults.
Yeah.
Right? Not this kind of, a blanket thing that this is no good for anyone.
Yeah, you know,
unless you're, I don't know, 25 or something. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And, a lot of things that are made, you know, I can think of examples of franchises, become franchises, but started out for adults. And kids who were allowed to see them loved them, and the franchises would change, adapt for the kids.
Because they'd realise where the market was, you know.
Police Academy,
audience,
Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters wasn't really a kids' film.
No, not at all.
Now, if you look at the second Beetlejuice that's coming out, the first one I think is still a 15. I watched it recently, and it's comedy, but there's gory, there's some swearing in it. It's a 15. The new one is a 12, and it's so being sold at kids.
Yeah.
There's merchandise. They traded it before Inside Out.
Yeah.
So it's developed into something.
Well, it's Burton, isn't it? Tim Burton is making movies that mostly are for a younger audience, that are not adult strictly.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why.
Yeah, but early on in his career, I know he'd done Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
But Beetlejuice was the one to me that stands out as not being so kiddie friendly.
There was a little swearing in it. Yeah. And obviously there's sort of sexual references and stuff.
And references to suicide.
Obviously, again, those kind of things, which, I mean, stories about such things, depending on how they're told, how they're dealt, how we deal with it. You know, there are a lot of stuff for younger teens that have these kind of these kind of stories, you know, where teens feeling sort of disfranchised or you know, alienated and stuff, and have these kind of thoughts. And thankfully, because people are talking about these things more, so younger people are talking about these things more with adults, that it can be discussed and therefore shown in media more. Which is good.
There's the suicide message in Beetlejuice is the dead couple are talking the teenager out of killing him. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah. Exactly. It's important because it is something that young people do feel.
Yeah. And I feel we're going back to Friday the 13th, even though they all stayed when they came out anyway, they were 18s. The films was clearly being aimed at teenagers.
Yes.
The fact there was comic books and TV shows coming out. I don't think nowadays, if there was an 18 certificate movie, this is where things have changed the other way, you'd be allowed to make stuff aimed at kids around it. And I think, but also something that's made now, if there's a new horror, the more recent franchises have all been 15 certificates.
Yeah.
They've sort of worked around it to make it. There'll be the gory images, but not as much.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think they've toned it to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas back in the 80s, it was just, and that's why they were more popular then. It was just a gore fest.
Yeah.
And kids, teenagers, I'm sorry, will always love them. But also the younger audience, they want to see them because they think they're going to be so scared of them that they should see them. I can remember watching the first time I saw a clip of Nightmare on Elm Street. I was so young; it scared the hell out of me. And I was like, but part of me always wanted to get over that fear.
Yeah. That's how I was about with horror movies. It was always just, I'm scared, really scared, but like, you want to see it. You want to make yourself capable of watching this thing that's scaring you.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that's probably about right.
Generally really love this film. I love the franchise.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie of its type. It's one of the most important films of its kind, and certainly something I think for everyone who likes a good old horror movie should come and see King Street Cinema on Friday the 13th.
And also anyone who's actually interested in film, because of what this is 44 years old now.
Yeah, 45.
And it trendsetter, and it's looking back at an era.
Yeah, I mean all the things we've gone through.
It's just everyone should see it if they're over 15.
Of course.
And if they're not, I'll lend them the video. No way. Well, good. They wouldn't be able to watch it.
Indeed. Yeah.
But
again, another thing to experience, something that's become an obsolete media, really. The VHS, so you can come remember what it was like to watch a VHS, but at the cinema, which is a completely different experience.
So Friday the 13th of September, 7:30 p.m, King Street Cinema.
Yes.